So I've been amazed at the reaction that I've had to the talk that I did on Motzei Shabbat on Christmas and the Jews, a barometer of society. First of all, the fact that it went on for 2.5 hours, we had an hour and a half of chat, and I think we could probably have gone on for even longer than that. And it was a very interesting discussion with some very strongly held views, and not altogether agreed by everybody. It was a very interesting discussion. And even since then, I've had loads of people who've come to me and talked about this topic, and who have said that they've been talking about this topic amongst themselves, about how the Jews have related to Christmas. And as those of you who haven't seen the lecture, basically I gave a history of the Jews' reaction to Christmas. But what seems to have really interested people is how we all celebrated, or not, maybe not celebrate is not the right word, but how we recognized Christmas, what we did on Christmas when we were kids, or when we were, before we came to Israel, and how that's changed since we've all come to Israel. And I have with me here Andrea Samuels, who many of you will have read her excellent work pieces in the Jewish Telegraph and Jerusalem Post and various other places, and her blogs. She's originally from Manchester, from the posh end of Manchester, I should say, from the south posh end of Manchester, as opposed to me from the plebby north. And Andrea comes from a family who we would describe, I think, today as traditional. I came from a family which I always described as a sort of the frummer end of United Synagogue. And it's interesting to see how the difference is how we related to Christmas. And for me, when I was a kid, Christmas sort of, it was, what did it mean? It meant, well, there was the Great Escape was on telly, or The Sound of Music, so we had to watch that, and then the Queen's speech. And there was always good TV. There was Morecambe and Wise and all those kind of things, and the sports personality of the year, and all the kind of good telly was on. And Christmas to me as a kid meant good TV. We didn't do Christmas dinner. We didn't have crackers. We didn't have presents. We had presents on Hanukkah, of course, but we didn't have, we didn't recognize it. We didn't go out of our way not to recognize it, but it just passed me by, as it were. And it seemed when I was at school, and I was in a non-Jewish school at Manchester Grammar School, where the vast majority of the boys weren't Jewish, I just got the sense that this was their festival. I had other festivals. I was quite happy with Hanukkah, and Pesach was always my favorite, particularly Yom Tov. And those were the things that gave me the frisson of excitement coming up to it. But Christmas sort of passed me by, and it was a sort of, I was parav about it, really. And I know that Andrea has had a different experience when she was growing up, because she wrote about it in her article. And Andrea, tell us how you celebrated Christmas, or recognized Christmas.
So Christmas for me was a really exciting time of year. I went to Withington Girls' School, which isn't a Jewish school. I was one of the few Jewish girls there. And as far as I was concerned, I was always going to join in with what was going on in school at around Christmas time. So I joined in the nativity plays. I would join in the carol service. I was very happy to join in with the assemblies. We did have a Jewish assembly ourselves, but I would go to that too, but I would always take part in what was going on in school. So around Christmas time, things really did start to gear up, and I would be in there enjoying it all with everybody else. And when it came to my own family, it was my mum's birthday on Christmas Day. So we were going to have some sort of celebration anyway, but it would always center around a nice Christmas lunch with other family members coming and joining us.
What did your Christmas lunch consist of? Can you remember?
Yes, turkey, obviously.
Okay.
With apple sauce and brandy butter with Christmas pudding, and I mean, we had the works. Although we didn't have pigs in blankets, I should say. No, it was kosher. Obviously, but it was a Christmas lunch with crackers and hats and everything else that goes with a Christmas Day lunch. And then after that, we'd sit down and watch the Queen's speech and the telly and do everything else that you do on Christmas.
So apart from the tree, which I know you didn't have.
We didn't have a tree, no.
Why didn't you have a tree, do you think?
Because we're Jewish.
Okay. Okay, so you didn't have a tree because you're Jewish.
Yeah, but everything else.
But everything else was okay.
Yeah.
Is that not inconsistent?
Of course.
And did you think it was inconsistent at the time?
No, and in fact, even now when I think about Jewish families having Christmas trees, it makes me recoil. So I think it's fine. And I know there's absolutely no sense and no reason why this should be. But for me, the line is, as a Jewish family, you don't have a Christmas tree, but everything else is fine.
See, that's really interesting because, and this is really the point that I wanted to make with having this conversation. Because for me, that makes no sense at all.
And my logical brain knows that it's not sense. There's no sense in saying, well, it's fine to have a Christmas Day lunch with all the trimmings, but you shouldn't have a Christmas tree, and certainly not one of those, what do they call them, that you put on your front door?
A wreath, yeah.
A wreath. Yeah, that's definitely not something that a Jewish family should have.
Okay.
And stockings as well.
You have stockings?
No, you
stockings.
can't have stockings.
So you can,
but you can give presents as long as they're not under a tree.
Isn't
and
it
they're
interesting?
not in a stocking.
Isn't it interesting? I've only just thought of this. Isn't it interesting that all the things that were okay for you to do centered around food? Yeah, that's a very Jewish thing, isn't it? To center around food. So for us, for me growing up as a kid, we didn't have Christmas dinner with turkey and all the trimmings and what have you. Although, I'd be honest, I think my mother would have liked that. My mother, I think, would have enjoyed it. My father would certainly have had nothing to do with it whatsoever. He wasn't somebody who was dafka going to have, a boiled egg or beans on toast just because, and he would certainly enjoy the Christmas spirit, as it were, of watching the good telly. But there was no way we were going to have a Christmas dinner. And we, if anything, we would look at people like you and think, oh, that's Christian, that's no, we can't be doing, you can't be having Christmas, you can't be having turkey, you certainly can't be having crackers, and you certainly can't be having Christmas pudding. Having said all that, we did have Hanukkah pudding and mince pies. Okay, we had mince pies, but there were the mince pies that you got from what's that shop called? Swiss Cottage. And instead of having a cross on them, they had little Magen Davids on them, so they were okay. And I also recall that in the kosher restaurants in Manchester, in JS restaurant, they had a festive dinner, which was all the trapping, but they called it a festive. We weren't allowed to call it Christmas. But the point that I'm making is that somebody like me, who was from a family not that dissimilar to you. I mean, I went to a similar school to what you did. We were a bit more religious than you, and we went to shul a bit more than you did, and we celebrated things a bit, but not that tremendously different. But nevertheless, I would be looking down at you and saying, wow, that's really very Christian. And you would be looking down at the one next to you who had a Christmas tree. And of course, the one
looking down on the ones who did less than ourselves. And what we did ourselves, we got it right. We got the balance right. Yeah. We would celebrate Christmas and have a bit of Hanukkah at the same time, if it fell on at the same time. And of course, we'd go to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we'd have a Seder night. We were doing the right thing because we got the balance right. Whereas you're going a bit far with your not having a Christmas lunch. I mean, you lived in Manchester, you went to Manchester Grammar, all your friends probably did it. What's the harm? Why not?
Okay. So that's exactly the point. So I think what's interesting here, and of course, those people who were more religious than my family would have looked down on me watching the Queen's speech. I mean, that was all a bit Christmassy, wasn't it? And things like that. So what's very interesting, isn't it, is that I thought we had it spot on, and you thought you had it spot on. So,
and we did, and it was lovely. The problem that I had in my family, was that we celebrated Christmas, but we never had a sukkah. We didn't celebrate a lot of the Hagim. And when it came to me having my own family, my own knowledge of Judaism was very, very poor. And it left me in a very awkward position when I had my own children and they came to me because they went to Jewish school, and they would be able to say Birkat Hamazon, they would be able to daven. I couldn't join in, and I felt embarrassed by this.
That's interesting. I find that sociologically really interesting, that here we were in, did you go to a Jewish primary school?
No.
No. Okay, so here, Andrea went to a non-Jewish primary school.
I went to Withington.
And then there was also a primary school, right? So Andrea went to non-Jewish primary school, non-Jewish secondary school. I went to a Jewish primary school and a non-Jewish secondary school. But the primary school education that I got, which was far more religious than my family were, was such a wonderful basis for my knowledge that by the time I was 8 years old, I knew Birkat Hamazon off by heart.
Yeah, so with my kids.
Right. So that enables you to connect with your own religion. So what you're saying is, in some ways, even though it was
the building blocks from a very, very young age, it's very hard to catch up when you're older.
And I think that's very true. And
the building blocks can come from your family or from your school, because we're not a religious family, and yet my children went to all their education's been Jewish schools, Jewish nursery, and now we live in Israel, so obviously it's all around them, and it's just inbred. They know who they are. They know how to daven if they choose. They know how to say grace after meals if they want. They can, they can do all the brachot. They can do everything.
Knowing now what you know now, and living here in Israel, where, as you say, it's all around us, Shabbat is, you feel Shabbat, whether you keep Shabbat or not, you feel Shabbat.
Correct. Shalom when you go in a shop.
Right. And you see Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach on the bus.
And even if you're going out on Shabbos and doing something which is not Shabbostic, and you see somebody else doing the same thing, you'll still say good Shabbos to them, even though you're both obviously not keeping Shabbat.
So let me ask you this question. Now that you live in that environment, let me ask you two questions. Number one, do you still think that you got it right when you were a kid?
I think on the one hand, I had a very lovely childhood and I enjoyed everything that we did. But now, knowing what I know, I think there were things that were missing. And I think it probably could have come from maybe going to a Jewish school, although I loved my school and I wouldn't change that at all, because it was a great school and I got a fantastic education. I don't know. It definitely did leave me with a hole as an adult, insofar as my own religion's concerned. It's left me with a distinct lack of knowledge. I am ignorant in so many ways when it comes to Judaism. And thank God we live here now, because my kids, they don't really need to come to me anymore. They've got it all around them. They speak fluent Hebrew, and it's part of their lives. So they're not looking to me for that knowledge.
From their childhood and their adolescence, because they're older than children now, obviously they're adolescents. Their adolescence is a very different adolescence to the one you had. It's a much more Jewish adolescence than the one you had, because they're living in a Jewish.
They live in Netanya.
Correct. So they're living in a Jewish state. Let me ask you the second question then. Second question is, do you miss it? Do you miss your Christmas dinner? Do you miss your crackers?
Well, that's why I went to Haifa a few weeks ago with friends. But it was nice. It was nostalgic. We saw this big Christmas tree and the lights and fun, but I can live without it. I don't miss it that much. If it's there, I'm very happy to partake and enjoy, and I won't snub it and say, oh, I'm Jewish, I can't do this. I love it. And if I go back to Manchester, I'll take part and go to the Christmas markets, but I don't miss it if it's not there. No.
I think the message that perhaps we can take from this is this, that there was a famous sketch that's just come into my head. Many of you will remember this. Certainly the English people watching this will remember this. There was a famous sketch with John Cleese, Ronnie Corbett, and Ronnie Barker. And John Cleese was very tall, and he was a toff, and he had a bowler hat, and then the second one was Ronnie Barker, and he had a trilby hat, and he was sort of middle class. And then Ronnie Corbett, the little guy, he had a flat cap, and he was working class. And he would say, well, I looked up to you because you were middle class. And Ronnie Barker said, well, I would look down on you because you were working class. And then John Cleese would look down and say, well, I look down on both of you because I'm upper class. And that is how I believe it was as I was growing up in England for Judaism. You, who was less religious than me,
you would look down on me.
I looked down on you because you were less religious than me. And
I would look down on you because you were a
and exactly, and I would look down on you. So anybody that's more religious than me is a fanatic, and anybody who's less religious than me, is not religious at all. You're just out of the picture.
Yeah.
And what an intolerant attitude that is.
Yeah. And you don't have that here, do you?
That's the point that I want to make. That what we have here, particularly.
You're a rabbi, and I'm a.
You had a Christmas lunch. I mean, I wouldn't normally sit with somebody who's had a Christmas dinner. So we have in our community, in our country, and specifically in our community, I think here it's a brilliant community. We have this diversity where everything is acceptable, and people are accepted for who they are.
And people come to your shul in trousers.
People come in trousers. People come in suits. People come in, yes, indeed.
Men wear skirts and men wear trousers. Everything.
Men can come in skirts if they like as well. I have a problem with that, and some people would, but not me. So we do have this diversity, and I think that this is something to be celebrated. In our particular community, we have Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and we have women giving shiurim, and we have men giving shiurim.
I can't imagine that happening in Hale.
It would not be so easy. So I think that we've made a huge progress since I was a kid and since you were a kid. And for me, at least, this diversity has been enriching, and I certainly feel inspired by being in this amazing country, an amazing community. Yeah, it's not easy here for some people. I was having a discussion with my son, as I was telling you earlier. It's tough for young people to make a living here and what have you. But I don't believe that any of them, despite the hardship, would move anywhere else. Because at the end of the day, where do you want to bring up your kids? You want to bring up your kids where Christmas dinner is something that you have to have because Nebuch, you don't have your own, or you want to have your own culture, your own heritage, and therefore you don't need your Christmas dinner.
And
so
also, living here as a traditional family like ours, you don't have the same worry about where are they going to get their Yiddishkeit from. So if you're not religious in Manchester, you're not really part of any Jewish scene. There aren't the youth clubs anymore that we used to have. There's nowhere for these kids to go apart from go and hang out in parks or nightclubs or whatever. There's nothing there for them that really they're able to go as Jewish young people who want to meet up and just enjoy each other's company. Here, it's all around.
And that's why we're here.
And that is why we're here.
So, believe it or not, it's almost New Year. Another thing that we will debate one day. Do we keep New Year? When is New Year? Is it Rosh Hashanah? Oh, it's your birthday, so we're going to keep it. Is it the 31st of December, 1st of January, or is it the 1st of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah? Or is it both?
It can be both.
That can be another topic.
I'm both. I'm British and Israeli. So I do keep the.
Are you British? Are you Israeli? Are you Jewish? Which is the I won't say most important, but which is the strongest characteristic that you feel? Do you feel Jewish to your core? Do you feel British to your core? Or do you feel Israeli to your core? What if I said you have to choose one? What would you choose? I know what I would choose, but
I'd probably say Jewish.
There you go. You see, you can't get away from it.
No, you can't.
I hope you've enjoyed that little chat about Christmas and the Jews.
And Happy New Year for those who keep it.